here we are, and I'm going to just turn off my phone here because I don't know what's going on. Here we are next to two things that I want to point out to you to start out. And so we backed up a little, so we're away from the bus at the very least. And the two things I want to show you are first to my left, or I guess to your right, depending on how you're standing, over here is this cemetery. And this cemetery is an important cemetery, sort of for the history of 20th century Israel in a lot of respects. It's the cemetery of the town of Nahalal, and we'll look at this town in just a bit. It was the first moshav, sort of an agricultural village that was founded in Israel in the 1920s. And this is its cemetery, and in here we have people buried who are relatively famous actors in the 20th century in the history of Israel. So one of them is Moshe Dayan. Moshe Dayan, if you've seen pictures of him, he has the eye patch, so very distinctive when you see him. He was the defense minister, and he was also a general in the 1967 war, and again in the 73 war. And so he was an important part of the survival and really the flourishing of the state of Israel through much of its history in the 20th century. Another person who's buried here as well is Ilan Ramon. And Ilan Ramon was Israel's first astronaut. And if you remember the story, he went up on the space shuttle with NASA, and he was on that space shuttle that disintegrated as it re-entered the atmosphere. And so he died as he returned to Earth with the other astronauts on that shuttle. And so he also, he and his family and others are buried here as well. And so one of the things people come here for is to go look at these burials and to remember events that took place in the modern state of Israel. And so in that sense, both in terms of this being a very old agricultural community and the different people who are buried here, this is an important place to visit. We turn from the modern to the ancient, and if you turn around and look behind you where the buses are, you'll see rising above you an ancient mound. And you've probably talked in your buses about ancient mounds and the way in which they accumulate. And so here we have a city that started in the Stone Age and has really lasted for thousands of years. And so next to this thousands of year old cities, we have this modern cemetery. And so you get a sense for this history that is ongoing. Would you like to put this one on? I've still got room. I think this is number 4, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is look at this ancient site a little bit more, and we're going to try to juxtapose it with the modern history of this region and also the ancient history, because they really do go together. And so we have the cemetery over here, the mound in front of us, and what we're going to do is walk past those two buses, and we're going to walk around the front of the mound and see why it's worth excavating. So come with me.
Shooting that on YouTube.
I know myself that it's pretty much whenever is acting, I use it. I usually have
I don't think anything actually got on me at all, that whole process.
I'm really surprised. I got kind of scared.
I like butterfly.
גם היום אמרתי להם שהיינו בכל מצרים ולא רציתי. אז אני אמרתי להם היום, אמרתי צניעות בקטנה ומחרתיים צניעות בגדול. אני אמרתי לא, אמרתי להם אתמול על היום, היום משהו. תנו להם מגבות, על בטוח, נכון? זה גם קלות, לפעמים זה כן וזה לא. מגבות מהרגילה? כן. אני חושבת שכן, אני רוצה לשאול. אני לא יודעת, הם רוצים לקנות את ה... לא, אני זוכרת שלפני... עם המחיר אתה מקבל גנימה שאתה צריך להחזיר אחר כך. לא, גם אבל מגבות. כן, מגבות גם. נותנים. אל תשכחי להגיד להם ראש משהו ככה. כן. Were you listening to him in your whisper?
miss anything.
Yes.
That's cool.
Okay, I'm coming next to you.
Them things red like crawfish. There's some big old ants over there. Stay away.
האמריקאים לא ישבו על התחת שלהם באפר. יש אבנים,
And you got an
יכולים
open
לשבת.
toe.
אף אחד לא יישב.
I'm saying them things red like crawfish.
Where are they?
Let's take it in.
See them? Them ants.
What is that? Oh, red ants? They're not red ants. They're like
Oh, snap is more.
it's like a beetle, a small beetles.
I'm telling you.
That's wonderful.
Look down through the valley, so just come up around here. In the shade, but also looking back out here over the valley. So if you can get in a place where you can be in the shade and see out the valley, that's what we're trying to accomplish.
And breathe and chew gum.
I'm not on. Which bus are you?
33. Channel 33.
How about now? Good. Come on over if you can. If you can come closer.
It's gonna be on the news right now with all those microphones.
Yeah, right. Is that pretty much the whole
No.
And so I'm going to sort of just give a sense of where we are and what's going on. My name is Daniel Master. I'm a professor of archaeology at Wheaton College in Illinois. For the last 25 years, I was excavating at a site called Ashkelon, and this site is just north of the Gaza Strip today, and it is a Philistine site in biblical times. And it's a site that was inhabited for thousands of years, all the way from the Stone Age to the Crusades. And our excavation, after all these years of digging, was winding down. Our sponsors said we should go to nothing but publication, which we were excited to do. But we had a team of people who were very good at excavating that I was privileged to work with, and they were interested in other challenges as well. And just at the time we were wrapping up at Ashkelon, the people at the Museum of the Bible came to me and asked what my next project was. And I hadn't been quite thinking about it that clearly yet, but they said they were really interested in sponsoring original research that would help us to better understand the biblical world. And so that was something that's always interested me and something that's been part of my research from the beginning. And so I worked with them and we thought about what could we do that would help us to understand not just, let's say, the time of the Hebrew Bible and not just the time of the New Testament, but really the whole span of biblical history, or even through the time of sort of the transmission of the biblical text. And so we knew we needed a site that was long-lived, that really what lasted from the Bronze Age all the way through modernity. And we looked around and we found this site, which was really the largest unexcavated site left in the country. It's a site that's 3 times the size of the much more famous Megiddo on the other side of the Jezreel Valley, and it is the largest site in this valley. Now this is a very important valley because it's the main way from east to west or west to east. So if you imagine people coming from this direction or coming from Akko or coming even farther up from Tyre, and they're headed over across the Jordan Valley, over and with routes running all the way down to southern Arabia if you go south, and routes running all the way to Babylon if you cut across the desert through Damascus and Palmyra. And so this is really a major intersection of east-west travel. And so all the currents of history that happen in this region happen in this valley. We were really interested in trying to understand those east-west currents in biblical history because we'd been excavating at a port for many years at Ashkelon. We wanted to understand how this world of the Mediterranean connected a little farther inland to agricultural villages. This site is also interestingly situated because it's right on north-south routes. As you come out of this Carmel range and you're headed to the north, you can't cross the valley at any point. The valley today looks like a rich agricultural area, but even as late as the 19th century, it was really a swamp. They didn't have good ways of draining things, and so there were only certain ways across the valley, and one of the major north-south trunk routes ran through this particular site from Megiddo and winding its way up farther to the north. So we knew we'd get some north-south interactions as well. One of the north-south questions that we had really relates to the question of something like the kingdoms of ancient Israel, as an example. You have in these hills farther to the south, the northern kingdom of Israel in the Hebrew Bible is expanding, is consolidating its control, and they're consolidating over this area of the Jezreel Valley in the 10th, the 9th, and the 8th century BC, and understanding how that works and how they build this major kingdom is the kind of question that we have in history that we can answer by excavating a site like this. We also have other kinds of questions. We have the east-west, we have the north-south between the Carmel Range and Galilee, and we also have an interesting other question. Are we in the hills or are we in the valley itself? You can see this site runs all the way from the trees behind you that you saw when we were in the parking lot, and just to give you a sense of the size of this ancient city, the other side of the city is the road. So extending all the way down here over all these plateaus, you have a city that would have had as many as 4,000 people in it, and it really kind of connects the hills and the valley. And the reason that's important, you could have seen from your trip to Nazareth Village. Because when you were in Nazareth Village, you saw the life of the highlands in the 1st century and what it was like in Jewish Galilee at that time, more or less, right? But life in the coast and life in the Jezreel Valley during those same periods was very different. This was the Roman world over here, and this was Jewish Galilee farther to the east. When Josephus in the Jewish revolt is trying to stop the Romans from invading Galilee, the place he stops them is right here. The town of Simonius is what it's called at that time. And so this is really at the intersection of hill and valley. The same thing is true if we jump back 1,000 years or more, and we're talking about the earliest Israelites that we can find in the archaeological record. Usually they're connected to a bunch of small little hill country settlements. At the same time, in the lowlands, the Canaanites are dominating. Is this site part of the Canaanite world, or is it part of the Israelite world? It's right at the intersection of the two. And so by looking at these different worlds and looking at the way this site fits into the broader geographic region, we'll get a sense for the way in which history develops in this area of Galilee. And it's something we're really excited about. Now, when we're digging up these things, we're going to find, as you can see on the ground, if you look anywhere around you, bits of pottery. We're going to find bits of bone. We're going to find bits of stone. All those things that you pick up and you would see on the ground here are all very ancient. And really, we can see that these objects are from, as I said, the Stone Age all the way through the medieval period. So we'll be able to get a sense for chronology by looking at this material. But in addition, because we will find people's houses, because we will find the places where they lived and worked and shopped and worshipped, we're going to get a sense for their daily life. And that study of the ancient culture and that study of the ancient daily life is really at the heart of what we're trying to do. We're going to understand the Canaanite world by finding the houses of ancient Canaanites. We'll find the ancient Israelite world by finding the houses of ancient Israelites, and by doing that and understanding what they understood, when we go back and we reread something like the Hebrew Bible or something like the New Testament, we read it with new eyes, because when they talk about a house, we understand what that is. When they talk about grain, and they talk about threshing, and they talk about all these aspects of daily life, we found what they mean by those things by understanding these ancient cultures. And what we find is that by bridging that cultural gap that we have, we see the biblical text as a cross-cultural document, and we understand it better. And so what we're going to do is we're going to understand those ancient cultures. By understanding those ways of life, we'll understand these texts better, and it'll help us to understand the whole development of biblical history. And that's a hard process. We're going to start doing that tomorrow. The first day of excavation ever at this site is tomorrow, so I'm busy. But we'll have people start coming tomorrow. We'll excavate it. You can look down at the bottom of the site, and you can see the rippling black shade cloth down there. You see that amongst the trees, just all the way down by the road? That's one of the areas that we'll be excavating tomorrow. And we have a sense for what we're going to find. Last year, we walked across the site and picked up things we found on the surface. We dug little test pits. We used ground penetrating radar. We used magnetometry, and what we did was found buildings under the site, and we looked at the date of the pottery that was on top. We found that area seems to be from the Bronze Age. We think that when we start digging tomorrow, we'll start finding things from around 1500 BC. So we're very excited to find those things and to see how the ground penetrating radar works. As we worked around this site, we found that it was so big that unlike some sites that have one city on top of another, and one city covers the earlier one completely, because the site was so big, they didn't always live across the entire site. So maybe in one period they lived just on the east side, another period they lived just on the west side, or the north or the south, or whatever. So as we did our research last year, we were able to isolate other areas of the site where we're going to find different things. So right in front of us, you can see just off to my right as I'm looking down the hill, you see a fence with some ribbons that are sort of flowing next to it. Can you see that just over there? Mm-hmm. Yes. Maybe some of you in the back can't see, but it's right off over here where I pointed. As we worked there, we found only late Roman material. So as we start excavating there, either tomorrow or the next day, we have to figure out whether it's going to be tomorrow, we will find material from the Roman period. We're really excited about the Roman period. You saw Nazareth Village, but there's another interesting question here. This site continues to be inhabited after the Jewish revolt, and there are large Jewish communities here in the 2nd and the 3rd century. And so off in the distance here, as the sort of highway winds away, you have the site of Beit Sharim, which is an important site of the rabbinic period, and behind us you have the site of Sepphoris, which is another important site in these same periods. There's sort of a line from